Welcome to another Kame House lobby with the 2MK team. Today, as always, we are doing Dragon Ball Fighters. This is a US East Coast lobby. US East Coast 02. Ring Match Priority Lobby 02. And you're looking for the red hit in front of Kame House. That is me, Rillian. The passcode for this ring is 2717, and it is a loser stays on lobby so that you can get the max practice without worrying so much about being able to perform at the highest level possible every moment. This week we're looking at corner control, and if you're not familiar with this type of game, you go in for a lot of surprises relative to standard 2D fighters. If you are familiar with Marvel style games though, a lot of what I'm going to say is going to sound fairly familiar. When you're cornered in this type of game, you've normally been knocked there fairly quickly by a strong opponent attack, which means that they now have to try their best to approach you quickly. One of the better ways to do this, depending on their character, is to jump at you. But since so many options in this game can be blocked while in the air, and there are a few others that can be evaded by not being on the ground, one of your better options in that situation is actually something we have called chicken blocking for the longest time. Basically, that you hold up a back on your stick or pad instead of just back or even down back. Depending on your opponent's ability to hit you at the start of your aerial movement or your jump, i.e. in your pre-jump frames, which you are familiar with from other games, you may be entirely fine, especially if said opponent was trying to come at you from the air and you want to deal with that without having to figure out a way to block grounded. But this doesn't get you out of anything, and depending on the situation, your opponent can push on you more because they did this. Still, as with everything else, we follow the mnemonic. We start with blocking. Your other standard method of blocking depends on the opponent's character, of course. You block high, i.e. standing normally. If you see them jump and you don't want the chicken block, or if they're standing fairly far away. Except, of course, for the few characters that have really good long forward sliding 2M, crouch medium. This is actually quite a large number of the cast relative to some games. There are at least like 6 characters that can just hit long, low attacks from relatively far outside your range. But the main reason for doing this and not just crouch blocking is because assists help to cover that space while the player jumps, making it even more important to do said chicken blocking. Therefore, let's look at it the other way. That's a pressure, that's defense against pressure. Not really what we've been covering this week. Just obviously we need the starting point. In this case, we're looking for corner guard, and this is no less character dependent in Dragon Ball FighterZ as it is in any other game. Obviously the implication is that it's actually much more character dependent. Knowing your opponent's strings so that you can deflect them. Knowing how and when to up-tech and or vanish after that to reposition yourself. Knowing when to use your level 3 and knowing when your assist can help you stop their approach or just push them off when they're already next to you. But again, that's mostly about defense and we're looking for the guard part. So, with so many options on the opposing side, how do you guard the corner in this game? It would seemingly be quite difficult given that your opponent can use Vanish at any time. But it is a little easier than it would initially seem to be. The main thing to remember when you are guarding the corner is that you should not generally use your meter to do it, except through Vanish itself. You need to be able to stand close enough to your opponent that their super dash is not reactable anymore. You don't want to react to their super dash in the countering sense at all. Because your opponent's super dashes can also be done as switches, standing at that range does not give you enough space or timing to prevent the switch, and the switch is the largest problem you face when doing things in this game in the corner position. Generally, you want to stand just far enough away that your opponent thinks they get to hit a button and you just punish it. Usually with your character's auto combo. This is a lot easier than it sounds in a lot of situations. There are many distracting ways of moving around in the game. And there are many ways of giving the opponent the impression that they can get away with this. Furthermore, spacing yourself correctly using your normals and covering your space with your assists make it even more important. Corner guarding correctly with assists is one of the strongest things you can do. And it helps, therefore, that a lot of the time if you reach the corner guard situation in the game, there's a decent chance that you will be able to call assist to help with it. But generally, calling your assist and going for pressure requires that you have a decently strong understanding of your opponent's reaction to seeing your assist. If you have a good sense of spacing, the effectiveness of corner guard is so much higher than the effectiveness of actually going for pressure that with most longer range characters you don't want to pressure at all. This is also because your opponent is so much more likely to use up their meter to get out of the corner or otherwise save themselves from certain things, that you'll just end up hurting yourself more often than not. Meter gain is quick enough in the game that after cornering someone, you will often find that that's their positioning. They'll have enough meter to do something to get out of the corner if you try to push on them. It depends on the character. Some don't have good wake-ups, and sometimes your own character can have such a good knockdown setup that you can go for it. But we're not talking about that. If you have repeatable knockdown setups, you probably don't actually care about corner guarding. You should just blend your opponent to death. When you don't have those sorts of setups though, corner guard is generally, and we would almost say oddly, superior to actual pressure.
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess.
This is because proper use of your assists and proper spacing of yourself are so powerful at locking the opponent down in the corner in this game, in combination with your heavy moves, which is something we have not seen so much, both your stand heavy and your actual EX moves done with your heavy button, that the gain in damage and control of the match that you have from doing this is a huge and pure advantage. The only downside really is if you can't manage to punish your opponent well enough when they make the mistakes. But, as we've taught before, your auto combo is often a good way to do this without having to think too hard, and auto combos tend to convert better when you are in the corner, leading to you being able to do more things toward the wall and put your opponent in more stress, switch characters, anything else you can find that stresses them out. More importantly, in almost every case, unlike other games where the opponent's attempt to get out can mess with you, since it is impossible to do things like back throw, and not many moves or combos side switch, or lead to easy movements like that while still having good damage. It means that the player who gets out of the corner is nearly never in a position to immediately re-corner or challenge the one that was guarding it. In short, you can let your opponent get away without having to worry about them re-cornering you immediately. In fact, trying to chase them down quickly is often a good way to get hurt yourself, so just don't do it. Unless, of course, you have an assist that is capable of doing that chase down or an attack from that range for you. If you have good enough reactions, though, you can often use your own super dash to pursue them, depending on how they try to get away from you, of course. So, whereas you normally would be using your crouch heavy as a neutral tool to move around and bait your opponent, be ready to go for your super dash on reaction on seeing them try to do their corner escape. Often, if you flinch and do it wrong, you'll still be fine. You'll end up clashing with either their super dash or their jump. But it's much less likely that they're just going to block you out. Your opponent, on the other hand, doesn't really have too much they can do from there. They can hurt you or stop the super dash, but normally they get nearly nothing off this in terms of damage. How can you best optimize this, therefore? Be ready to hit your heavies, be ready to hit other things, and be ready to super dash specifically. Your crouch heavy tends to be less meaningful in this spacing, unless you were also a character with moves that would let you easily super dash at longer range, and also Dragon Rush. Most characters don't get both options. Those few that do have supremely good corner guard. However, you can obviously make do with just one or the other if you incorporate your stand heavy and that move is also decent, or your assists cover the space that either your super dash or Dragon Rush would have. The sheer amount of control you have with just your assists and your super dash in the corner guard situation can frustrate opponents who are spending a lot of time there without even actually using much meter or effort. This is simply because they don't have enough time to settle themselves into being ready for their own crouch heavy or other method of stopping the super dash. And even if they did, most of the time they don't have anything they can combo into or convert into that is heavy enough to help them out. This means that by doing this you build up enough meter advantage to put your opponent down even if they do escape or things shift out of your favor and you take some damage. The opposing player is the one who must take the risk or use the meter to get out of the corner, whereas you get to guard the corner and somewhat gain meter without doing anything too strenuous for your meter. You can also watch and learn when your opponent can manage a big punish or does manage a big punish off of your super dash. And watch out for other options you can use. Again, often your heavy button or assist handles that situation really well, and since the super dash and assist can combine in a lot of cases, you simply can't be counterattacked at all. The reason this is so useful is because your opponent no longer has direct control over the range they've moved to. Nearly every situation in which an opponent has specifically tried to jump out of the corner, They don't have a move or method to do a full escape and still block or stop your super dash. And you know exactly where they're going to be standing when they land. If you understand how to abuse that spacing with your own character, their loss often exceeds yours even when they've got it right. But there is another form of corner defense in this game. The up tech that we like to mention. You can fix a lot of your opponent's corner carry combos by up-teching late into it. Another good option is to, as soon as you land, if your opponent did not pursue you, or in conjunction with your up-tech, call your assist immediately. If you think about it, this makes a lot of sense because the chances of you needing or being able to use your assist right after that knockdown that is, are really small and not too helpful. You don't generally expect that the situation will be instantly reversed such that you have more options. This is what makes it so important to use your assists or the corner guard. On both sides, you are able to properly utilize this by using the assists when you have no specific idea of what's about to happen in the corner. And assuming that by the time you've managed to lose control of the corner, you have the assist again. Making them a very strong corner control resource, even if only because it's convenient to use them to build up more meter rather than having to do all that work. Why bother opening your opponent up at all when you could just call more people to help you? You can see here, for example, that despite the match absolutely not going in Rune Siren's favor, the meter war did. And figuring out how to utilize that meter with your EX moves, which we have not really covered much of the use of before now, those are generally either things that go in combos or things to use at the moment of your own personal preference. In this case, they start to get a little bit more meaning. Most characters don't have multiple heavy/EX moves that help in the corner situation, but there are definitely enough of them that you should consider which one you have influences the corner the most. If you have a pressure-y character who is able to stick to the opponent as a result of using their move, or just change the spacing relative to the medium version of the move and somehow trick the opponent or leave them guessing in a particular situation, your corner control will become stronger, even if your pressure does not, because presumably they would just block either way. Your assists are also a good way to cover your motion so that you can get into range for Dragon Rush without your opponent necessarily noticing all that route. Assists in the corner are very distracting because the opponent's focus is compressed into a very small space, and they are spending so much more time thinking about their defense and getting ready to find that moment to hit the right thing to get out, that they're much more sensitive to motion and other shifts in the play. Seeing another character on the screen, therefore, tends to activate this twitchiness and get you an advantage. The corner is also the place where you're least likely to want to switch character using your super dash just to catch up or do anything like that. You can manage most of your combos and trickery without having to do any switches at all. And if you've cornered people, most of the time, if you really needed to switch, you did it on the way to the corner and are now at enough advantage that you don't care so much. If you can continue to think about these factors, you don't even have to actually do anything about them. You should just be able to recognize that the tendency of the game is toward the situation where when you cornered your opponent, you are already in a position where you don't have to think about switching or those things. You're just at your advantage and have the ability to use your assists to hold them there and not think too much about anything else. Now, our players are currently showing a way that this goes when you know that your opponent is actually going for the corner guard rather than for pressure. When an opponent intends to set up the corner guard, just as in Street Fighter and in Guilty Gear, the neutral jump is a good option for the defending player. This is because the neutral jump allows them to call their assist, super dash at the last moment if they need to, fake the dash out by going for the double jump, or just call for the switch. The last one is generally not that safe or good an idea. Opponents that tend to wait for you on the ground for too long also have to deal with you attempting to go for the super dash. But more importantly, they have to worry about you vanishing while in the air or going for the dragon rush as soon as you land, or even if you just jump and do it immediately. Neutral jump is among the strongest methods for escaping the corner in Dragon Ball FighterZ. But it can't be just the neutral jump, obviously. That doesn't take you anywhere. You have to neutral jump with a plan and execute that plan either quickly or in response to your opponent's action. Most assists have little or no influence on a character who is neutral jumping at the range that corner guard is normally happening. Those characters that have decent attacks from the air, even if just interruptive ones, can keep themselves fairly safe in these situations. As it counters people with the twitchy super dash reaction as well. Those few assists that do target well are often evadable by the double jump. So overall, play your game normally, and at least until your opponent has shown you a reason not to do it. If you are defending in the corner, jump straight up. If you are guarding the corner, move to the appropriate range for your character and start using assists and building meter, or if you have EX moves that really help, use that meter to stick to your opponent or otherwise make them miserable. It also helps, of course, that the assist used to help you corner people is often not the assist you need in order to guard said corner, making it even easier to push. It's important to be as patient as you can when trying to escape the corner, even through those consistent neutral jumps. You will find that your opponent will often give you a chance to use either your switch or all that meter you've probably managed to build up by them cornering you. And honestly, using your meter to get out of a corner guard situation is among the best uses for it. It's relatively easy to get out of the corner simply by vanishing. If you whiff, your opponent often ends up cornered themselves. And it tends to be the case that they are the one that used up most of their meter doing this and can't really afford to be spending a whole ton more. But if you get too twitchy at the corner guard position, it's too easy for your opponent to stress you out. Generally, one should attempt to be as calm as possible simply because it is not generally possible for an opponent who is cornered to deal a lot of damage to you or really make the situation too terrible. If you can react to their vanish, you can often react to their vanish with your own. And since even when you are re-cornered, raw vanish is still not that damaging in and of itself, you really don't have that much to worry about as long as you have at least one bar of meter left. So, with all that big block of theory covered, let's start looking at more specific and or practical applications of it within matches. Meaning that I'm going to be a lot quieter in general, except when actual corner-based interactions are going on. As you just saw, the main reason why one does not want to be too close is that the opponent will super dash faster than you can react in normal space. And their intention after the super dash is not their usual intention. Therefore, your muscle memory betrays you. Their intention after a super dash from corner is usually to keep going and get over your head. meaning that all your punishes, which are intended primarily to stop people from continuing to attack you, will all fail. And even if you think this sounds easy to deal with, remember that muscle memory is a hell of a drug, and you therefore should not expect that it's going to be easy to go from seeing a super dash, especially at a very high speed, to remembering that you're in a corner situation and therefore don't actually want to do this. Another good advantage to the spacing ones of us stand at is that even if your opponent does get over your head, most of the time, if they are twitchy and want to continue their attack, their spacing is actually fairly disadvantageous for their character. Only the trickier characters in the game benefit from the spacing that follows a corner escape from their side. Characters who benefit from this are Vegito, Kid Buu, Piccolo to some extent, Frieza, and Nappa. Everyone else basically has no way to start their own new offense without being at fairly heavy risk. As you can see once again, more often than not, because of the meter shift in the game, the player attacking directly into a corner situation is going to be suffering bigger damage. The trade-off is not necessarily in your favor. Whereas baiting your opponent's level 3 is a gigantic advantage. Keeping this in mind will at least partially transform your game in terms of understanding the rhythm. As you get to higher levels, the game will be more and more focused around the corner, and some of these things, even though they will still apply, will have many more layers of psychology and character and player matchup involved in them. But for now, especially as you're just learning, just bear those things in mind. And if you don't feel as if you have it so far, no worries. Basically, we're going to be repeating these principles for the whole stream whenever they become visible. But do remember, you should not be trying to save your assists for the corner situation. Use your assist to maintain advantage in neutral, and assume that by the time you need to do corner guard, they'll be back. The sort of character that uses their assist for long combo extenders that tend to put them into that situation also tend to have other ways to deal with the lack of assists once they're there. We are still seeing some of Rune Siren's jitters here, in that she continues to move far too much without specifically knowing what she's aiming at. It's not really necessary with Gohan when he has this much meter though, as he has basically 6 or 7 invincible uppercuts. And good pressure. Vegeta has to worry a lot more about landing his confirms in order to make this count. But he can still play a very long, relatively drawn out zoning style game with this much meter, as it allows him to vanish from midair when he feels as if the situation has gotten out of hand with his other aerial moves or attacks. Vegeta is difficult to corner trap because of the whole fact that the easy way to get out of the corner is the neutral jump, and he's so relatively strong from it. Therefore, if you're able to stay calm about it and not worry too much, you should be able to get away. Keep in mind that, as mentioned before, a lot of the characters in this game lose their effectiveness on their auto combo, or even some of their juggles, when you try to jump out, even if they hit you. They'll clip you, forcing an air reset, which is something that has to be reacted to in order to maximize the damage. The air reset often also sets up a situation where your character can up-tech out of whatever comes next, and it makes it a lot more difficult for other people who don't have good air supers to confirm into big damage.
A fierce showdown is about to begin.
This means that of the 3 characters on Rune Siren's team, it is relatively easy to get out of the corner with 2 of them, and the one that does not is the one with the invincible wake-up option, and the 2 assists that help cover that space. We see a good decision there, in that having been the one who got turned toward the corner side, and knowing that there was very little chance of her managing to flip her opponent back into the corner and be advantaged, Rune Siren simply used her assists immediately. It will help her catch more space and control to finish her own escape from the corner, and they'd almost certainly be back by the time any new corner situation occurred. Even adult Gohan can benefit from just jumping straight up. It's just that he has much less chance of actually doing damage with it, and is more looking for moments to call one of his own assists, or go for his elbow. Fortunately, he has such a good auto combo for punishing and a good stand heavy in terms of range But he doesn't have to use that option. He is relatively susceptible to the super dash though, meaning that on both sides of this match, you have a character who should mostly be watched when he's in the corner rather than specifically attempting to pin him down. There you see the delayed up tech, creating just enough invincibility to get out of Trunks' juggle and solving the main problem. And there we see a relatively good escape from the corner from Trunks, but not a whole lot coming off it because, as mentioned, you never tend to get too much. Understanding the corner guard as usual makes the game more exciting overall. There are a lot more very intentional actions on both sides, and it helps you keep in the right mindset and stay more patient. It can also be somewhat comforting in the sense of building up a lot of meter. So you have to worry a lot less directly. Omni Rabbit is now at the disadvantage given the ability to use all of her assists from Rune Siren's side. Fortunately for him, she probably forgot about them, and therefore he was able to take advantage of that lapse in concentration. Your assists are critical enough that if you don't know what you feel like doing or how you plan to attack your opponent, your default should be to use them rather than to try to do any of your own moves, as you are putting your own character in danger, point character, as opposed to those who are currently in reserve. When you don't have your assists available, you shouldn't worry too much about it. Your opponent is less likely to quickly notice whether or not you have assists available. Therefore, for the most part, against most players, even though they technically would have the time to check it, given that it's most likely a hard knockdown, or they know approximately when to up-tech, and could simply look at your side of the screen, chances are you will be able to use the Dragon Rush on them then, because they have built up the expectation of being corner guarded and having to deal with assists. If you realize you don't have them, there's no need to pause and wait for your opponent to also recognize you don't have them. Dragon Rush really quickly to keep their mind on something else while those assists recharge. Because at worst, if they tech the Dragon Rush, assuming that your situation is decent and one of your better guarding characters is in position, it's just not going to matter. There are a few characters who are really not that strong at corner guarding. Fortunately, these characters are also often on teams or just in their own right, characters who are good at keeping up pressure or mix-ups, which is what we tend to see from Omni-Rabbits. In short, these characters can handle themselves with the corner guard without too much assist help, meaning that they mostly need the assists to cover positions where the opponent might try to get to, rather than the concept of guarding by pushing with those assists. Again, try not to hesitate too long when corner guarding, especially if your opponent backs off and gives you the space. You're much safer in this situation against nearly every enemy, again except Frieza, by just neutral jumping. Trying to get out of the situation on the ground means that you are probably going to hit forward at some point and flinch your way directly into a beam. Whereas the neutral jump option gives you a lot more timings and a lot more openings, as your opponent generally is likely to have less options for putting pressure on you there. There are obviously zoning characters who can get into the air themselves and throw out their beam from there, but not only does this lead to weirder combos when they try to combo it into Vanish, a lot of them can't actually manage anything off it at all, and you end up escaping the corner anyway at the cost of very small hurt. Obviously, when you are down to your last character, you don't have assists to help you with your corner guarding. Depending on the situation, you can either go for the most confusing mix-up you can, which you've been saving up because obviously you didn't need to use it before then, or use up some of that meter you probably didn't have to use, and see what you can get out of that. This can be a little predictable, but if you've managed to hold most of your benefit in the match up until that point, you're probably okay. You're certainly not going to get torn down or have to suffer too much as a result of attempting this way. You've just seen another good demonstration of taking advantage of the way people think while they're in corners. If you do super dash into your opponent in the corner, and you feel as if they're going to manage the defense, just go backward as quickly and as far as you can. For many characters who do not have really good pursuit options, or for players who don't have particularly strong quick reactions, this often leads to the equivalent of what we've described in Street Fighter, where you are just guarding by neutral jumping. You are in the air and your opponent does not know exactly how or where, whereas you have a very clear idea of where you are and how long it's going to take you to launch an attack to pin them down. Alternately, you may not need to launch any attack at all.
Brace yourself for the coming battle!
The final principle of corner guarding. Relies on understanding why a double jump works the way it does in this game. And what attacks are most useful after this sort of thing. This is one of the more character-dependent parts, and therefore you have to pay special attention to whether or not your character is one that should be aiming to double jump or merely never bothering to do it. We'll go through these more or less one by one as we get more corner interactions to look at. As a general rule, characters who don't have any good air options other than Super Dash should not double jump. This is also primarily true for characters whose aerial key blast, their special button, can easily be outranged or shifted in such a position that you can't do anything with it. Despite the fact that one can do this to Gohan, he's actually one of the characters who can use his, but he's still a character that shouldn't double jump. Because once you double jump, then that move becomes very useful. Vegeta, on the other hand, should probably double jump practically all the time. But in Dragon Ball FighterZ, you're going to have to really fight that instinct you have to just defend in the corner. You're going to have to fight the instinct to avoid taking damage in the corner. This is also true in other games when your opponent's skill is high in cornering you. But that level of skill, it comes way earlier in Dragon Ball FighterZ. So you have to really push hard to get over the feeling that you shouldn't jump, you shouldn't make yourself vulnerable, you shouldn't occupy certain positions, or that you need to rush to do certain things with your meter. Your opponent regaining their advantage is just too much anyway, and it won't end in anything good for you, because even if you escape, you often don't get any better. One good way to do this is likely to feel a little ridiculous. When you are in the corner, just hold up. Don't think about defense and don't think about what your opponent could do. Just hold up until you learn just how much damage you really take for doing it. And you really shouldn't, like, factor all those times where your opponent has recognized you're doing it and decided to do level 3 or something. We're talking about the moments where they probably would have gone for pressure or did go for pressure. We're talking about the moments where they are a little bit twitchier about the fact that they've managed to corner you and don't know what to do just yet, or they're just in an offensive flow. The overall rule though is hold up. Because you will learn more about it if you do. It is also a good way to learn whether or not your opponent's knockdowns are real. Which is actually super important information a lot of the time. It's good to get away from your opponent if they happen to not have it perfect. But again, that lack of knowledge will come back to bite you later. So you might as well go for it. Unfortunately, we see Rune Siren again going for the corner guard without the assist, giving Cell a chance to get out and recover. It can be hard to get used to this if you don't play this type of game very often. Certain people have the ability to mentally switch easily to a new concept, a new idea of how to win or play when playing different fighting games, and some people just don't. Meaning that you'd have to practice a lot more in order to keep yourself going this way. A little desperation at the end there causes our adult Gohan to be lost. It's also fortunate that most of the time, holding up earlier than you need to will just result in the same up tech that normally helps, making it even easier to get used to the idea of it as a positive thing. Treat that up direction as a way to see things, to buy yourself time, to understand your opponent more. Especially in this loser stays on lounge where the worst that will happen is that you'll end up playing more. You can see there that even with the damage taken, even with the relative annoyance of being hit by 2 beams and a command grab, there wasn't that much actual damage taken. So there wasn't really much of a reason not to just hold up. Sometimes you can just hold up forward. This is again because getting hit while you're off the ground in certain ways means that your opponent is less likely to be thinking about vanishing into confirms, and certain vanish confirms just don't work anymore.
to begin the match. Get ready. Fight.
もう終わりか。下がって邪魔をするな。そんなバカな。いくぞ。なめんじゃねえ。来い。下がって。
Here we see some really clean corner guard from Metacon. But I can't necessarily tell if he both held up, but I don't get the feeling he did. Bardock is absolutely a double jump character in the corner. With his assists as defense, especially on a team like this, and his many good air attack options and good air normals, he can almost get away for free. At best, you can take advantage of the fact that he is so likely to double jump and try to punish it anyway. But you really might not be able to get that much out of it, no matter what you do. Tenshinhan's corner pressure is usually a lot better than his corner guard. His incredibly good knockdowns make it even easier, and his good damage puts a stack on top of that. But in order to get really good damage sometimes, Tenshinhan must call others in, causing him to switch out and leaving you with much less effective knockdown pressure. Therefore, you should generally pay attention to, as a general rule, whether or not to try to escape a certain way from Tenshinhan, based on how much damage was done and how many people he called in to assist with the super, because obviously, if he's no longer the one you have to face, you have to figure out how much danger you're in from the remaining character.
Time to begin the match. Are you ready? Fight it out!
As mentioned, Omni Rabbit's team are generally decent, if not good, at handling their corner pressure themselves. However, they can still call the assist just to add a little extra confusion or a little extra insurance to their corner pressure. If nothing else, the additional confusion helps people playing this sort of character to focus themselves on the opponent's reactions and gather information about how their opponent reacts under that stress twice as fast. Krillin's after image strike, both in neutral and in the corner, are already fairly confusing. Adding in some basic assists to that, while the timing is difficult, can definitely still lead to the opponent feeling even less comfortable. And obviously, given that the after image can be fake, the amount of time they have to recognize whether or not it was is drastically decreased. Here we see the use of the super dash in the aforementioned similar way to the neutral jump. Standing at that range can make it really hard for the person in the corner to feel comfortable enough to take an action. Or they're likely to take an action that is unsafe and will lead to them just getting a full combo back into the corner. A relatively terrible fate for them, honestly. The combos you get off this also tend to be better because combos starting from heavies have different scaling than just pinking someone and managing to open them up and then get a not very large combo in the first place. Meaning that there's a whole lot of extra reasons why luring your opponent into making a mistake in the corner is just so much more rewarding than anything else. On the other hand, the damage taken just now from being hit out of that super dash was absolutely trivial. The scrambles that are created by these approaches require so much more effort and focus from the defending character, or so much meter usage, that you just shouldn't even care about getting hit. Remember that the spacing is so much more under your control at those positions that thinking about that too much is just giving yourself trouble for no reason.
Brace yourself for the coming battle! Get ready!
Interestingly, Kid Buu is generally not a double jump character when he's asleep in the corner. This is because a lot of Kid Buu's aerial moves are lateral, and jumping twice just takes him out of the position where he's likely to be able to use them. However, a single jump is usually enough to be helpful. And as we all know, his strong mastery of air moves and the control related to it means he doesn't have a lot of problems getting out of bad situations from there. Once again, here we see the absolute benefit of knowing the position of an escaping opponent really well. Whether it be after they fail to defend your super dash, or even your crouch medium, if your character has one of those longer sliding ones. While I'm sure I've said a lot of things, fortunately, you don't always have to remember them all at once in order to make them effective. Picking one for the general duration of one match is still enough to pick up understanding of why and how to use them all, and allow you to integrate them naturally. Unlike certain other aspects of the meter or assist usage in the game, which are mostly only useful if you can manage to keep them all in mind at once. Unfortunately, it seems that Vegeta is going to be standing on the ground for a little bit. Should still not be enough to completely lose him, though. I stand corrected. Didn't happen, but I stand corrected.
Vegeta, win! It's time to face your opponent!
Goku is a character with a lot of decent corner escapes, but very few really good ones. A lot of his involve actually attempting an attack and hoping the opponent doesn't track his spacing as well. However, he is one of the strongest characters at using either his own heavy attack or Dragon Rush on an opponent who expects that he's going to take a while to take an action that they can respond to themselves. This still is not a good corner escape functionally, because more likely he's going to be blocked or teched than have that attack actually land. But it's still relatively advantageous, especially if he has certain assists on his team or follows up with certain moves that have good push-up. Cell, being perfect, has a choice of whether or not he wants to do the double jump in the corner. And the opponent really doesn't get to do anything about it, whether he does it or not. Cell can therefore either double jump or not at his discretion and have approximately the same effect. What he lacks once he does that is a good escape once he gets to antsy and does an attack he shouldn't have. Therefore, staying calm while Cell is in the air is similar to dealing with Beerus, or in certain situations Frieza. All three characters have a good mastery of the situation once they jump, but not so much when they're coming back down. Cell is the strongest in that he can use his warp attack to get out regardless of that, whereas Frieza's warp attack must be done from the ground. And Beerus really just doesn't have any options that don't involve attacking. The delayed vanish for the good setup. One of Brawly's best tricks. But not enough to save him.
Time to begin the match! Ready? Go!
You can see here Trunks' corner control is very strong, and in conjunction with Krillin's ability to set up the Senzu Bean, it can lead to a fairly dominant position in the corner. With proper corner control, Trunks can often defeat entire teams by himself. But it does definitely take quite a lot of patience and skill in both reading your opponent and targeting your attacks, as Trunks tends to be very clearly linear in particular situations. Much like Goku, he ends up being susceptible to the opponent going for their Dragon Rush to get out of the corner. But he does have good enough spacing where this won't necessarily finish him. When cornered himself, he is actually a double jump character, but not because he has particularly good air options. Rather, because his other options are so strong that the opponent is less likely to be focused on it. Krillin is much less of a double jump character, even though he has some good options. This is because Krillin's attacks tend to cause him to hover in the air, so it really makes no difference if he double jumps or not. Therefore, getting back to the ground fairly quickly is more so useful than not. His after image, however, doesn't really change its spacing depending on how high he is in the air for some reason. He still tends to land in about the same place, so you don't benefit that much from jumping twice.
Time to begin the match!
But again, you really don't have to remember all of these things. As usual, I mention them only so that if you want to rewatch the stream later, that basically all the information is in one place. And rather than go through the entire cast, we'll use the diversity of the characters played in the group to cover both the exceptions and more or less the rules, the reasons why certain things are certain ways, so that you can figure out how you can apply it to your own characters or how you prefer to. Since there's nothing that says that you must do all of these things, simply reasons why it tends to be stronger in one situation or for one character or another. A good neutral jump kept out of most of Raleigh's attack. But as noted before, that is a two-step process. You have to be comfortable enough to hold up and comfortable enough to feel out what to do, or at least try to, based on watching your opponent. Fortunately, since holding up isn't really that strenuous, it's a little easier to spend your time focused on the opponent in those moments. Just trust and assume that if you hold up, you should have enough time against an opponent who is not super aware to determine whether or not you should vanish, do a move to get out, dash out as a generality, or counterattack. Kid Buu is an extremely good assistant in the corner situation because his assist sticks around so long if it makes any contact that your opponent really has no option but to jump and get caught in things like that. And you can see that he's back already. It really does happen quite fast. The bonus confusion added there is just too much to give up. And the additional sparking blast just makes it ridiculous. And once again, we have the expectation overall that Kid Buu will be back by the time any cornering happens and it's necessary to care about this again. Vegeta is not as good at this because he has to be called much earlier. But if you have enough awareness, it's usually not too bad. A close finish based on the vanish nearly working, but also spacing really well for the final attack.
Vegeta, win!
その痛み決して忘れるな
We got to see the corner guard in full effect. And a lot of the bumpiness and randomness of the match therefore got smoothed out. So despite both sides putting up a strong performance, you got to see a lot more of their team synergy without it feeling so rubber bandy.
Time to begin the match! Are you ready? Fight!
We see Cell's effectiveness as a corner guard assist there as well. He's normally better at setting up further corner pressure and being confusing. But if your character has some good upward or a diagonal upward attack, he can be a good corner guard assist outright regardless of anything else. Brawly and 16 are generally not as good for corner guard helping of Cell, but Cell can normally manage to keep up the pressure on his own, meaning that he generally needs them to cause respacings and be distracted. And that was either very real or no upheld. Level 3s, however, tend to have good knockdowns. And therefore, if you want to add yet another rule to all the things that have been said so far, if you get knocked down by a level 3 in the corner, you probably don't want to hold up. You want to wake up with sparking or your own or whatever you can do to get out of the situation altogether. Here we have more assist-based corner guard. And there's the reason again why you don't try to get out of the corner by moving forward without jumping. Characters like Goku absolutely can still hit you. But the hit doesn't tend to lead into as much misery. The previous situation allowed Cell to keep up a lot more of his movement, giving him enough stamina to at least keep up for a while longer, but it just looks like the end.
いの感が鈍ってるな。
Gohan! Win!
これが今の僕の全力です。
Get ready for battle!
The strengths of characters in the corner are generally clear based on how strong they are in pressure and mid-screen, unless their pressure really depends on side switching. Characters who depend on counters or very long-range whiff punishes, however, have to play this out a little differently. And Broly is functionally one of those characters. Therefore, when Broly wants to achieve corner guarding, one has to focus on what exactly that would mean for a character that has this type of damage and is able to put you back in the corner so relatively easily. What exactly is he guarding against you doing? His ability to use the super dash whether or not you try to get out at all means that you don't change his game plan too much. You getting cornered is just an excuse for Broly to super dash. Calling his assists can help lock you down and be confusing, but he has a relatively linear attack style, and a lot of his grabs don't work if the assist cause a certain lockdown, so that's not really the optimal situation either. Despite his decent jump normals and off of air setups, he also does not benefit too strongly from trying to hit people who are neutral jumping. And in this situation where he has no assists, even if he does manage to corner, what then? The most important thing to understand is that Broly's overhead and leaping attacks, instant dash attacks, are some of the best in the game. And that he can stand further away while still controlling space and punishing with his just heavies than nearly anyone. So let the oppressive character do what oppressive characters do. And oppressed by sheer aura. Broly doesn't benefit that much from trying to get in that way, so he can just stand over there and wait for you to make a mistake. And if you refuse to move to make a mistake, he has quite a few ways to either bait you into trying something, or just annoy you for not trying something.
Get ready for a Dragon Ball Rumble!
He's one of the few characters that does not use heavy attacks in order to do this, but rather throws out actual level 1 supers to either bait or catch you.
Are you ready?
But being able to power up his shell, do certain forms of his moves, or just generally be annoying from further away than most characters, means he doesn't have to stress that much about corner control as a whole in the way that everyone else is thinking about it. His long range also helps with his corner escape because he can just stick out mediums in neutral or super dash. To put it simply, Brawly doesn't believe in corners. 16, on the other hand, despite having a lot of similar options, doesn't have as much freedom in them. However, he is a grab character and benefits a lot from his assists in terms of guarding the corner because of his ability to quickly attack diagonally up forward. And to do so without any risk of the opponent really being able to get out or the hit not working in the way he wants or expects. He gets what he wants in that position almost all of the time. So, figure out a way to make your opponent jump, and then grab them and put them in the ground again.
This should be a great fight! It's all or nothing! Let's go!
Once again, we see really clean corner control here. With the assist to cover the position. And that sort of thing is what allows you to really push on your opponent and finish them off quickly. By the time they've realized what's going on, the situation is turned against them very heavily. Corner control against Tenshinhan when he hasn't done the knockdown is almost always either a forward movement or a neutral jump. You're not going to get a lot of chances to do this though, because when Tenshinhan decides he's going to knock you down into the corner, he often makes sure you stay down. Therefore, we don't really suggest building up a whole lot of strategies for dealing with him. That would involve a lot of thinking. Just hold up and hope that that's going to do something at some point. He's also a phenomenally good character at making sure that he builds up the meter rather than using it if he didn't use the meter to put you on the ground. You can see it here by the huge meter disparity created more or less just by Tenshinhan fighting. This increases the chance that the neutral game will lead to the corner quickly through combos and other heavy moves. And relatively big conversions like that one. With both assists back, this corner guard will be relatively easy.
Shinhan, win!
いつもお前に頼ってばかりいられないからな。俺も力になれただろうか。
Showdown is about to begin!
Vegeta and Gotenks' corner guard is similar to Trunks, but Gotenks normally can stand closer or spend more time in the air. Vegeta doesn't have this option because Vegeta's good corner guard options have not related to the air at all. It helps quite a bit if Vegeta can call assist distract while he sets up either the Dragon Rush or a straight up jumping attack. In short, he's better at pressuring, and the mix up being, is he going to pressure or is he going to call an assist? And Gotenks has similar setups. However, they're both phenomenally good at getting out of the corner in the same way, because of either invincible moves or very long active moves that the opponent is not quite sure how to interact with. They can even still do the straight up neutral jump to escape things and still do those moves. Therefore, these characters benefit a lot more from calling their assist as part of their corner guard pressure when something has gone off and their opponent's attempt at escaping, usually by holding up, has caused a scramble. Their ability to attack multiple vectors without having to aim too well or too perfectly timed means that calling the assist to just extend things long enough for them to see where the opponent went is normally enough to get the benefit. In short, they get 2 pressure, relatively. Even if not immediately, but often need their assist to help them when the pressure doesn't go exactly as expected due to the opponent moving. In Just Fighting, we see a lot more lockdown options, making this even easier. But as usual, it causes that difficult execution issue with calling assist relative to swap. Fortunately, this one's a little easier to get over than most, given that it is happening on an offense flow, and you might be able to get yourself to recognize, okay, this is a scramble, let me let go of all other buttons and just hit my assist. Their strong Dragon Rush pressure style game means that they also don't have to worry about it as much in that direction, opening up even more chances to call their assist to help with it. Cell's situation is generally the same, but with these 2 particular assists, he takes on the same sort of role, and they are called for the same sort of reasons. He can afford to go for many more moves that would catch people who were moving into particular positions, and if he happened to be wrong, call the assist to help out. As opposed to when he's in the team with Brawly and 16, who really don't cover those spaces or buy time all that well. Once again, we see these strong Dragon Rush style setups. And the flow of Cell handling the situation without needing the assist in that particular case. This sort of play has a very specific way it works out for Cell, because he doesn't need to beat up people a lot in any given interaction. The meter advantage gained from correct corner guard allows Cell to just keep going indefinitely, meaning that you don't have to think too hard about the overall tactics or a shift in the matchup. Just keep in mind that your meter will keep on regenerating as long as you keep on doing your corner guard more or less correctly. There's another scramble situation. It will take a little while to build up the muscle memory to just treat scramble situations as immediate call assist. But once you've got it down, your opponent will generally be much more stressed, and you will be much more comfortable in those same situations. The limitations it places on you are mostly related to swapping, but you can just use all of that meter you're gaining to do. If you absolutely need to swap out, burn 2 levels of meter to get it done. A good distraction throw there manages to get Tenshinhan out of the way, which is actually making this match a whole lot harder. If you were around last week, we discussed how much stress these two characters give to just Goku and Gohan without Tenshinhan available to actually deal damage to them. Together they can last really long. But Goku does get the good hit in order to bring down Gotenks, and from there it will be relatively difficult for Vegeta to finish it. Without his support in this aspect of the match, Vegeta has to be a lot more careful and use a lot more of his neutral jump setups. That said, Vegeta's defense is generally good, so it does take a while to bring him down anyway.
showdown is about to begin! Get ready! Fight it out!
Against Broly's generally superior range, you can expect the opponent to have a little more confidence hitting buttons, and to be unable to stand close enough to really be confident in your Dragon Rush. Meaning that for this particular matchup, this particular character, corner guard is done the other way around, where you actually do call the assist to cover the space for you. Once Broly is out of the way though, these characters can continue doing their normal methods of corner guard. They're just being generally annoying and Gotenks and Vegeta working to call in their assists when the scramble goes poorly. Or they don't understand what the scramble situation is. Like here. The opponent is forced to switch, but doesn't really escape. And the situation still tends toward being useful to the offensive player. As you get more and more used to it, you also build up stuff off of the positioning that they spend their time in. This part does take some time to get used to. The fact that the opponent will generally be at a set position. But doing it correctly helps you build up the observation of this happening, so that you have a much clearer idea of where this is going to go. You can still note that at the end of it all, Cell still ended up with a large meter advantage. And while it may not be enough to help him get a finish, it may be enough to help both hands get something. With two players still in the game, it is still possible to set up Broly for a lot of pain. But once again, we have the scramble with Cell managing to save, working out primarily because Broly actually went forward. A generally good counter to Cell. The final result was still, however, that Cell got enough meter to be effective, and to set up his Dragon Rush to extend that meter even more. So despite this large disparity in health, the Cell Mirror is in fact a Cell Mirror. However, going into the air in the Cell Mirror leads to this sort of thing. So either a hard read or a lapse in judgment results in the shift.
鉄くずが今さら何の用だ。貴様の力などいらんぞ。
Regardless of this, being able to watch your opponent and their reactions to things that you understand about what you're doing helps you build up experience to make better decisions in future.
Time to begin the match.
初めから全力で。
Get ready.
そこか。はい。逃げろ。いや。すぐに終わらせてやる。
Note that despite all of that, not only is Tal at the life advantage, he's still at the meteor advantage. Understanding corner guard nuance really changes the meteor part of this matchup heavily enough to shift certain interactions way more than you'd expect. Furthermore, you can use that sort of situation to do unexpected things like activate sparking early, go for level 3s, just raw switch on wake up, and other things of that nature. As noted, both Cell and Vegeta handle their own aerial scrambles rather well, freeing their assists up for other work. You can see there part of the other reason for the neutral jump is that it makes it easier to block the super dash. Again, this is functionally the same as the chicken blocking mentioned before. Just hold up back instead and don't worry about it. But again, level 3s do tend to lead to real Oki, to real knockdown setups. So you do have to be careful about this. Since Sparking was already gone, there wasn't really an option to deal with it. Just had to let it drop and hope that there was a way through. And the same situation is about to occur. It's easier to just block or watch the opponent and jump at the right moment though, from that range. For characters like Gotenks and Vegeta who are more likely to pressure from closer up and wait for the scramble, the direct jump up is less likely to help. For them, you often want to use your basic defense position, but they just have good pressure. So, in a way, while it does not help as much, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to make a different decision. It means that you're just more likely to get hit. Fortunately, they don't necessarily do as much damage in the corner now that certain things were patched out a couple months ago, and they can't just do consistent Dragon Rush catch on new characters switching in or shifted positions. For Vegito's corner guard, there are two ways to play it. Pressure and hard reads, effectively not to bother corner guarding at all, or to utilize his neutral jump special along with his assists to lock the opponent down. They can super dash through this, but the assists, especially if you have assists that are particularly good at it, will cover this space. You see again, Trunks ends up with the relatively large meter advantage here. Some of that was from before the corner, obviously, but quite a lot of it came from just doing the corner guard correctly. Proper use of the neutral jump makes it simply harder for your opponent to pin you down for their own pressure. Or rather for their targeting, particularly if they jump away from you in order to get ready to do something. If they're hoping that you will come straight for them and make a mistake, the neutral jump resolves this. As you can see, once all the pieces are together, it can be really hard to get out of the corner against someone who's focused on it. Your best bet is often to just delay the whole thing, but if your opponent is mentally more than one step ahead of you, you'll often get Dragon Rush and it'll just be erased. Krillin, on the other hand, guards the corner well enough to buy himself time, helping him perform his role either in a team or overall. After all that setup was mostly just to make sure that the situation helped in terms of the Senzu group. No matter how much damage is dealt, if you can control the rhythm of the damage dealing speed of your opponent, you can always switch at the right times and solve yourself the problem. Furthermore, this sort of setup tends to lead to a lot of timeouts and very long matches, meaning you could win by attrition simply by understanding your opponent's rhythm well enough. Fortunately for Beerus, his defense against people who want to do this is relatively high, as they can't really get in on it. So let's talk a bit about Beerus's corner defense. Beerus' corner guard basically amounts to putting his orbs around himself and standing there. He doesn't have to do anything whatsoever to achieve corner guard as a holistic thing, other than have his assists ready to counter the opponent's super dash, or something set up to do it himself. The more difficult part for Beerus is actually managing to damage someone who decides to just sit there and not worry about it. Most of us don't think of Beerus as a character who has good Dragon Rush setups, but in the corner he becomes very good at it, since his orbs allow him to stand way closer than any other character normally can. This does, however, depend on the speed of his assists. If you are playing slow assists along with Beerus, this will be very difficult because you can't clip your opponent to force them to not use certain moves to get through your orbs. If you are playing quick assists, obviously you just hit that as soon as you see anything happen.
The battle's about to start. Good luck! Ready? Fight it out!
Sixteen's strength in getting out of the corner is the fact that he covers so much space when he does certain special attacks. And since they are basically unreactable, you have to preemptively use your assists a lot. However, proper preemptive use of those assists can help you control and get a clear idea of when most 16 players are likely to try to do this, meaning that you actually can counter them. They could wait longer, but a lot of those moves don't work well against Crouch Heavy or Dragon Rush, meaning that you can call the assist purely to set up the correct timing and situation, even if you would absolutely know that he will block it.
修行の成果を見せてやる。行くぞ。
Trinity in this matchup style often revolves around his stand heavy. It's so easy to give the opponent the impression that he's not going to attack. But when he does, they're not really expecting that move, plus it actually has a much better hitbox and speed than most people would expect.
クリリンさん、引退しても力は衰えていないな。僕も見習わなくちゃ。
Time to begin the match! Get ready! Fight!
殺してやるか。楽しめ。死に損ないね。この程度。俺も少しは役に立つかもしれない。無駄だ。さて、こいつはどう生きたって。さあ、なんだと行くぞ。無駄だ。問題ない。問題ない。こっちだ。行くぞ。甘いな。せい。俺が殺してやる。殺してやるよ。
Due to Broly's general relentlessness, he's a harder character to catch with the scramble assist setup. For this team's assist, Broly will tend to be moving forward and pass under these attacks. But although despite everything else, in the end, the meter advantage was heavily in favor of the Vegeta. And now only evened out but still not exactly useless. This particular combination does not necessarily synergize the best on that team, and Vegeta can manage a lot of corner guard on his own by things like that, the neutral jump into stuff. The problem now is managing to face off against Cell with Cell having meter advantage. Seems that the good decision here was to immediately go for Sparking, negating basically this entire super. And therefore restoring it, other than having to deal with, of course, Cell's Sparking Blast. This therefore will come down to a matter of control in mid-screen, since it's relatively easy for Vegeta to get out of the corner against Cell. But with no character to help him fix the scramble, he has to go for the hard read. But this should force the Sparking. No, apparently not. No Sparking today, and therefore Vegeta takes the win. As options go, going for that was probably the best, given that if you think your opponent is going to hesitate because you have Sparking, your side is most likely going to block and therefore it works out in the end. This matchup demonstrates where Beerus's corner control fails. Against Broly and 16, who really don't care about what they do after their super dashes. Even the time Beerus spends putting up the orbs on the corner will just lead to them immediately super dashing. It might therefore be better to either not go for it at all, or try for some form of pressure. Strategically, another good option would be to simply switch out so that Beerus is never the one holding the corner position, because he just is disadvantaged while trying to guard this particular pair. Whereas Zamasu does the job much better. And Vegito can definitely be part of it. If you're really aware of what you're doing in this game, one successful corner guard setup and a copious use of meter can often be enough by itself to take a character, meaning that you don't have to focus on this for quite as long, except when you both happen to make the neutral choices. But I expect that even one correct choice will generally lead to a big conversion. And for the characters that don't, you don't really care too much. The massive can corner guard between both pressure and standing out at the correct space and neutral jumping, or even flying. In most teams that have him as part of it, the ground is covered by assist calls, meaning the opponent is basically helpless in terms of getting out. But always remember, Wally will super dash in nearly any situation because he doesn't care and really shouldn't have to.
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess.
Urori, 生きていたのか。
It's all or nothing.
You see there the advantage of, again, knowing where your opponent is likely to go even if they do get out. And being ready enough, in Brawly's case just with long buttons, to catch them. Brawly is by nature super hard to get away from in these situations. But if you feel as if the opponent is really pushing on you, you should generally just deflect when Brawly is closer. It's when he's farther away that you tend to have to be more worried about things. It's not that you won't be punished for deflecting, it's that the punishment is exactly the same as hitting any other button. Whereas at least if you time the deflect correctly, Brawly moves to a space that is disadvantaged enough for him, you get to do something.
どうした？
And once again, that particular thing that's hard to recognize at first, but we're seeing more and more of. Whenever your opponent escapes from the corner in a particular way, their spacing will be relatively predictable. Take advantage of this as much as you can, especially since the chances are that they will not be able to hit any buttons before you can.
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess! It's all or nothing! Fight!
Finally the corner, but Amiabe chooses not to guard that corner at all. Presumably because it's harder on Krillin to do it while building up meter, so you don't benefit that much unless you're willing to go for pressure. Again, you can see that despite everything, the difference between the two was not that large, and all of that extra meter allowed just fine to just decide I'm using some of this to get out and remedying my situation. However, a big confirmed take sellout. and this may come down to a matter of meter usage. Technically, from this position, Vegeta can use Big Bang Attack to space himself a lot more. But due to this coming up relatively rarely in normal fights, it's not really something you see a lot of. Unfortunately for Just Fine, that lift cost the round. Giving us yet another complex match to look forward to. Vegito, Beerus, and Zamasu have the benefit of covering a lot of vectors and spaces, making it relatively harder to get out of the corner against them with linear characters. In that case, therefore, you should take advantage of how long these various options take to set up, and generally conserve your meter to just use your level 3 as the escape instead. This is particularly easy with this team, so it really doesn't matter in the first place. If your opponent knows you are willing to use it or will use it, it also shifts things so that they are more likely to leave you alone on corner wake-up and give you more time to think about what to do. You can inch your way forward simply because they don't want to run into your level 3 or similar. However, this relatively defensive strategy does leave something to be desired when it comes to figuring out how to deal damage in the meter. Offset by the fact that, for the most part, even with strong attacks like that, mostly you don't tend to get worn down against this particular group. Even when, relatively speaking, overcommitting to things, you can see it takes a really long time to wear them down, and because it's difficult to force him to not switch, the blue health situation is usually much better. honestly, as you can see, they're also not the most damage output of characters in this particular style of play, because there's just no way for them to land heavy enough hits to get good scaling or good spacing. And while win by timeout is probably not what we want here, it's certainly an option. But Meteor Burn into big damage works very well from the other side too. And one powerful whiff punish to finish it off. That said, don't ever count Gotenks fully out, as long as he has enough meter and he's not cornered himself. You generally should aim to corner Gotenks as quickly as possible in these situations. This puts us into our final match of the night. All signs indicate that tomorrow we will go through more of potential kata, but more specifically a stronger explanation of exactly how Nashbot is intended to work with this, and more demonstration with multiple characters. Since a lot of this corner content is repetition and understanding, you aren't likely to actually spend more than 1 week covering it directly. But of course, you may still see more of it in next week's lounges, as it's a natural part of it all. Therefore, stop by tomorrow for this guidance, effectively speaking. And then next week, Monday, for our Mishmashing Battle Lounge for Street Fighter 5. Next week, Tuesday, will be Tuesday Train, Guilty Gear. Expect a little more combo effort. Ironic, since we didn't actually get into combo flows specific to Dragon Ball FighterZ this week. Next week, Wednesday, is expected to be open mic content for Street Fighter 5, bringing us back around to Kame House again on Thursday. So as always, we hope this content was helpful, even if you don't play these specific characters. Maybe there was something you could glean from it. To add to your own teaming synergy. Remember that each piece of the puzzle that you pick up does have to be practiced, but merely understanding that they exist can help you feel more comfortable about when you win or lose, because it's easier to see why it's happening. With that, it looks like Krillin's closing it out with an uppercut today. And that's the end of our stream for tonight. This has been Rillian with the 2MK team. Good night, everyone.